and Tom was struck with another critical concern. Structures like bleachers were not designed for this kind of dynamic load. If the structure collapsed with him under it, his body would likely not be found for weeks. As he dropped the last few feet to the ground, his feet crunched on gravel and litter. Above and around him, others were beginning to follow his lead and scrambled down the scaffold-like support structure. Now what? Exiting to the field was out, because that was clearly part of the shooter's target picture. A fence ran the length of the bleachers along the back, but he remembered from his own days as a football player, could it really have been only 9 years ago, that there was a way to sneak in, unless the never-ambitious maintenance crew had finally gotten around to fixing it. The hole had been there since Tom's oldest brother had played 10 years before him, and as far as he knew, there had been no turnover in the maintenance staff. Tom pressed himself up against the fence as he moved toward the center of the bleachers. In the reduced light, he hoped that when he came upon the opening, there it was, right at knee level, a section of chain link that had been pulled back. If he could have seen better, he was certain that he'd find the ground still littered with empty beer cans that displayed the whole reason for the opening to be there in the first place. These days, kids got expelled for such things. But could teenagers have changed that much over the years? Tom bent at the waist and squirted into the open, where the horrors continued. Out here the darkness was less absolute, with partial illumination spilling in from towering lights from the BMW dealership on the other side of Spring Hollow Way. In the dim light, he tried to ignore the aimless running and screaming. He was getting the hell out of here. And that meant making a beeline toward the driveway and the street beyond. 10 yards from the fence, everything changed. A cop lay dead next to the door of his cruiser, his windshield a shredded mass of broken glass. Blood poured from wounds in his head and shoulders. To the right, parked immediately behind the first cruiser, a second cruiser sat similarly shredded, its officer slumped behind the wheel. Tom Doron's battlefield instincts kicked in. This was no random shooting. This was a coordinated attack, and at less than a minute into it, the bad guys were winning big. They'd targeted the school's power plant to bring darkness and chaos, and then they'd taken out the armed element of their opposing force. This was going to be a slaughter. But where was the shooter? The bullet holes in the cruiser answered his question. The rounds had all entered from the front of the vehicle, from the west, the scoreboard end of the field. The shooter wouldn't be there. A carefully choreographed assault like this included a viable escape plan, and a rickety spiral ladder from the ass end of the scoreboard wasn't it. The screaming of the crowd had crossed the pain threshold, and football fans were still falling. So where was the sound of the gunshots? Jesus, he's got a suppressor. Where the hell was he? Had to be high ground. In Nebraska. The water tower. 2 minutes into the slaughter now, Tom knew where the shooter had to be. It was the right compass point, and it was the right height. The red light that sat atop the bulbous structure had been winking at him all along. What was that? An 800-yard shot? Barely even a challenge if the shooter had the right gun and a thimbleful of training. Tom had slid his butt into the first cruiser's driver's seat before he realized what he intended to do. Really, by process of elimination alone, it wasn't a hard decision. Staying here was untenable. Running away, knowing what he knew, was a choice he could never live with. So that meant taking the fight to the shooter. He needed a gun. He rolled back out of the cruiser and stooped to the dead officer's side, forcing himself not to look at the dead man's eyes. He pulled the cop's body toward him so he could access the holster on his hip. It was a leather job with a thumb brace.